All right. So we are on air again, and we are back after this break and the networking session that happened. Um, so now we're set to start our panel discussion. Let's move to it. I'm excited a lot because today we have with us fabulous guests. So you already remember them from keynotes that they've delivered at our program. And with great pleasure, I introduce them again. And we have management consultant, founder, and executive president of Deeply Practical PM, William Stewart, right from Canada. So thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on board. And our topic today at this discussion is path to resourcefulness. Okay, so may I ask our panelists, our speakers, to start from your perspective on resourcefulness, how you envision it. Bill, would you like to continue?
Sure. Thank you very much. And thanks IPMA for the opportunity. And it's great to be on the panel with Eva and Greg. So what I wanted to lay out as a foundation is that in order to be resourceful, you first need to be optimistic. And you need to believe that success is possible. And there's a layer below the layer I talked about in my keynote when we talked about that. You have to have a sense that the world in general is getting better and that it is possible to make things better. And we don't always think that way. The brain is in fact set up to worry. We've got the back of our brain is set up to be anxious because from an evolutionary perspective, it's important to worry. It's important to worry about big animals. It's important to worry about there's going to be a drought or a famine. It's important to worry that our kids might get hurt. Are they getting too close to the cliff? It's so evolutionarily we're built up that way. It can go too far though. It can go to the level of, things are in a really bad state. In fact, things are getting worse. And a lot of us fall into that. Maybe all of us at some parts of our lives. All of us fall into that. And I've certainly seen a lot of that around the world right now. A lot of people I talk to say, everything's getting, is there any hope? It seems to be an uphill battle and maybe we can't actually win it. So what I'd like to offer is that we're looking at the trees, not the forest. And if you look at the forest, and you use your rational mind, you look at the data, the world is getting much, much, much better. It's incredible how much better it's getting. There's a wonderful sentence that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. The arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. And that can take decades. In fact, that quote is more than 100 years old. It can take a long time. I'd like to just share something quickly here with you. Some graphs from an article by Nicholas Kristof. Here's a few graphs. Right here is the number of people that have lived in extreme poverty as defined by the World Bank, just between the 1980s and about 2015. And you can see it's fallen from 42% down to 10%. If we just look at the news, we don't think that's true. We think things are getting worse and worse and worse. It's getting dramatically better. If you take a look at childhood mortality, hopefully you can see this graph. Tell me if you can't. Childhood mortality has just plummeted. Throughout most of human history, about half of children died before the age of 15. Now that's down to 4%. And you can see the improvement from 1990 till 2016 has been quite dramatic. If we take a look at the literacy rate, The literacy rate from 1820, even from 1920, this red line is the world literacy rate. It's up to about 85%. 85% of the people in the world can read and write now. So it starts there. I mean, things are not good enough. The project is not doing well enough. We're not doing well enough on schedule. We're not doing well enough on budget. We're not doing well enough on world climate. We're not doing well enough on injustice. And all that is true. But in order to have the optimistic mindset, in order to be able to work on that in a productive fashion, we need to be happy. We need to think there's a chance. And so what I would just offer to people, especially young people, is that if you just extend your timeline far enough, the world is getting much, much, much better. I mean, I was born in the early 60s, and even in my little lifetime, I think of myself as young, things have got dramatically better. Racial justice, we're not there. It is so much better. Women's rights, things were really bad in the 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe even early 80s when it started to change. Before 1990, to be an environmentalist, you couldn't talk about it in public. It was a radical communist position. 1990, things changed with the demonstrations around the world with Earth Day. People realized the globe came together. So resourcefulness starts with optimism, which comes from a realistic assessment of where we are and where we go. You can solve problems. If you got problems in the project, you got problems in your life, you can solve them. Do not give up. Just keep working at it, and we'll get there. So there's a foundation for you.
Nice foundation. So that's very optimistic point. So that's thank you for bringing it to the discussion. The question I thought initially during your words was, if we start from the beginning, that resourcefulness is dealing with capability of dealing with uncertainty, how it then differs from, let's say, risk management procedures. Yes, Bill, please.
So with respect to risk management and resourcefulness, I'll just offer that it's a wonderful example where you see the benefits of optimistic thinking. In my experience, people don't like to think about risks. So that's why you need a project manager to get them in a room and say, what are the risks? What could go wrong? Let's make a list of things that go wrong. And then that's all you do. You don't try to solve them. It's just a very focused meeting. And then as the process goes, you may qualify them, and then you may quantify them and put numbers on them. And then you sit back and you say, and that doesn't take very long. That just takes 2-3 meetings, maybe, not very long. And then you sit back and you say, okay, so which ones are worse? What's the probable impact, time and dollars? Which ones should we try to do something about? And in my experience, you can almost always take about 1/3 to 2/3 of the risk out of the project simply by sitting down and thinking about them with that power of the team. Again, that power of the team, where surprising, amazing things come out if you just get more than one person in a room, possibly a virtual room, and talk about it. It's incredible what you can do about risks in advance. Sometimes all you do is you start work on it at the beginning of the project. Originally, you weren't going to start to month 3 or month 6, but you say, you know, this is really risky. Tell you what, even if we waste a little bit of time, let's start work on that actually in the first week. And just by chipping away at it, we'll be so much farther ahead of the game. If things do start to go wrong, we'll know it's so much farther in advance. Or maybe all you do is you kick it upstairs. Why are bosses there? To help us. Sometimes you say, I know what my risk mitigation strategy for this is. I'm going to start telling my boss there's nothing I can do about it. And if there's nothing he can do about it, he needs to start bugging his boss and shorten the approval cycle or get the resources, whatever the case may be. So it's a wonderful example of when the risks start, when you first look at the first list of risks, it looks hopeless. Oh my gosh. But simply by believing that you can find a solution with multiple brains, you can take a third to 2/3 of the risk out of the project during the planning stage before you even start.
Can it be a team and organizational competence? And is it possible to develop this competence further?
That makes a lot of sense. I like that. Like that a lot. I was speaking the other day about this thing called a growth mindset, which I heard from an elementary school teacher who was in one of my classes, and said that she had just come out of teachers college, and she had been taught that it's very important to teach the kids to have a growth mindset. The idea that just because this is what they're capable of right now has very little to do with they can be capable of, with some training, with some education, with some practice, some hard work, and help from others. You put all those together, they can get much better. And it's one of the reasons I'm such a huge believer in training. When I was a functional manager in a large organization, that was what I thought of my number one job, was to spend the whole training budget every year, because you learn from hundreds, thousands, millions of person years of experience in these courses, so you can make people better. I'd also offer, if you can, try to send your entire team or entire sections on training at once. Comms training, leadership training, negotiations training. If you can get them all together in that room, or bring an instructor in to that room, there's a sense of camaraderie and shared team development that happens when you send a team on training. They're all getting better at once. You get kind of like an extra benefit from that shared team training. I'd also offer, I think you need to tell your team some of these stories, some of these things that we're talking about here, some of the things Greg and Ev are saying. They're not mind readers, so you need to say these things that we can solve any problems if we just get together in a room. All of this kind of stuff. You need to, as we sometimes say, you need to vibrate the airwaves. You need to open your mouth, and you need to communicate this stuff. So setting an example is not just a physical thing. Sometimes you actually have to share the words. One other thing I'd offer is it's very important to encourage the team to be self-empowered, to make decisions on their own, and to take risks and sometimes fail. And one of the ways that I've found effective to do that is, again, you vibrate the airwaves. At some early meeting, you got a new team, a new project. You just take a moment, you just communicate that. You say something like, listen, folks, you guys are empowered in whatever your areas of responsibility are. I can't do this project. I'm just the project manager. I'm the least important person in this project. You guys are actually going to do it. And you're all empowered to make the decisions and take the actions required to create success in this project. And I want you to know that if you make mistakes and you take risks and they fail, good risks, I'm not going to get upset. And then I usually pause and I say something like, now there's a difference between good risks and bad risks. A bad risk would be, I don't actually have to turn the fire extinguishing system on when I leave the building this weekend. Nothing will happen. I don't actually have to do the backups. The disks are probably, see, that would be a really bad risk. But if you take a good risk, you try a new process, you try a new piece of software, you're trying something to move things along because you think it'll actually help. You don't have a better solution and it doesn't work. I'm not going to get upset about that. So you need to not only delegate and empower, but you need to tell them that you're delegating and empowering. Give them that permission. And if they do make mistakes, you can't get upset. You just can't get upset, because it'll spread like wildfire, and it's so easy to lose your credibility as a leader if you make those kinds of mistakes. You need to say things like, well, yeah, I've been there. I've done the same kind of thing, because that, I hope, certainly is true. I don't know about you, but I know for me, the first time I've done anything in my life, it was a bad job. It took too long and it wasn't very good. The first time we cooked pasta, bad job. Undercooked, overcooked. That's the way it goes. So you mentor, you follow up at least once a week, maybe more often depending what you're doing. But you need to give the team that room to be resourceful and to try things and to develop their capabilities and take good risks. Yeah, if I could just pick up on that quickly, and the lessons learned, you're right. If we could all raise hands here, if I ask the question, how many of us have participated in a good lessons learned, but they thought it was a really productive lessons learned meeting? My experience when I ask that question is 10, 15% of hands go up. We all need to do better at it, because it's the highest return on investment event in the entire project lifecycle. And one of the things you do need to do up front, vibrating the airways again, is you need to say something like, okay, everybody, let's check our egos at the door. No names, no blame. This is about us all getting better. So let's focus on the problems, the things that we can do better next time, and the things that went well that we want to repeat. So that you get no names, no blame. It wasn't John made the mistake. It was here's what didn't go well. So you have to say that.
Thank you for this, for building up these ideas. So I'd like to focus us on the next question that just appeared, and I guess this one can be valuable for a lot of us. So Jovita asking, I find it extremely difficult to hire people. How do you recognize a resourceful person in a bunch of CVs? Is there a way to spot them at the hiring stage? Would you share your experience?
All of that makes such perfect sense to me. So the only thing I'd add to that is some of the questions to ask, of course, would be things like, tell me about some very difficult situations you've been in and how you handled it, which is, I think Eva and Greg kind of already said that. You can also, of course, also ask tell me about your greatest failure and how did that go? And what did you learn from it? We tend to learn most from the failures because we think about them a lot more than the successes. So, I mean, that's a hard question to answer, but it'll definitely get to that honesty and truthfulness that Eva was talking about, because you'll be able to tell and based on their answer. And the other thing I'd offer is reference checks. I found I learn more usually from the reference checks than I do from the person. I ask for always ask for 3 people to talk to, and I know they're picking them, but it's amazing how much information I get from that. I phone them up myself. I don't farm that out to an HR firm or something, the HR department. I phone them up myself, and I usually start out by saying, thank you very much for taking this time. As you know, so-and-so gave you as a reference. Now, of course, everything that we discussed in this conversation is completely confidential, doesn't go anywhere. You say that unlocks a few things. And then you ask a bunch of questions. You have a list. And one of the questions is, so how do they deal with difficult situations? How do they get along with others? How do they deal with difficult people? Now, everybody can improve, Jane, even you and me. What do you think would be the thing that Tom could most improve on? Yes, those sorts of questions. And for me, that's usually been decisive. I would also say if you've got people, don't give up on them. Try to grow them. And take them off the team as the last resort. And that's why management can be difficult. One of the reasons, because you got to have very direct conversations. Things like, okay, so this wasn't up to the quality we need here. Here's what I'm going to need to do. I'd like you to work with John, who's got a lot more experience than this, for the next couple of weeks. Get as much as you can from them. We need to do this again. People can respond. You can, not everybody, but many people, if they're shown that kindness, along with the we got to get better, along with those two messages, you can grow them in many cases.
And now I'd like to ask you all the question, like, can you give us example how you became resourceful, or maybe you observed how someone became resourceful?
Sure. So I'd offer first to use your rational brain to come to your help when your emotional brain is not there, and that certainly helped me a lot. You kind of fake it till you make it. In other words, if you have problems and they look unsolvable, if you haven't had a lot of experience with solving unsolvable problems, and that thrill of saying, my gosh, that looked hopeless, and we found a solution. In fact, we're actually ahead of schedule now with that solution. If you haven't had that experience very often, you need to use your rational brain to tell yourself that that's absolutely possible, and then go try it, and then experience it. And then the lower levels of the brain start to kick in and give you that motivation next time to go chase that solution. So a lot of things come from our emotional brain, and then our rational brain kicks in. You can steer the other way until the emotional brain gets experience and kicks in. I'd also offer put yourself in difficult situations. If you're ambitious, you want to grow your career, which not everybody has to. Not everybody needs to put themselves in difficult situations. We need everybody on the team. We need a pitcher, we need a shortstop, we need a catcher, an outfield, to use a baseball analogy. But if you really do want to develop yourself, you have that ambition, put yourself in difficult situations, put yourself on hard projects. Don't stretch yourself too much. Don't start with $1 billion project, but take on additional levels of responsibility and find yourself in difficult situations. Because there's a saying that you can put a lump of clay out in the hot desert sun for 100 years, and it just becomes a hard lump of clay. It needs the heat of a kiln to turn into china. And I found that for myself. I've been in some very, very difficult situations and made it through, and found that from that I had developed a lot of resourcefulness, resiliency, and ability to believe I could come up with solutions. I would offer, don't take on too many things at once. That's not the kind of stuff I'm talking about. I'm talking about a small number of challenging situations. You don't want to get overwhelmed by the quantity. I'd also suggest sometimes the boss needs to insist that you do the impossible. Sometimes that's the boss doing it for you. Sometimes it's you doing it for your team. I told the example the other day of how I love Captain Jean-Luc Picard in Star Trek Next Generation. The team would keep coming to them and say, we can't maneuver through the asteroid belt. The maneuvering engines are all out. We can't do it. And he would say, well, we're going to have to find a way to get through the asteroid belt without the maneuvering engines. And I go, yeah, of course. That's what we need to do. And then they go off and find it out. And I've been in that situation. The example I gave the other day of my management said 3.5 years, it's got to be 3. They said, you got to go do what you guys might think is impossible. And sometimes you need the boss to say that, to say these other options are not on the table. You need to put 100% of your brain into finding this in order to sit down and concentrate and focus on it. So be responsive to your teams. Don't ask them to actually do the impossible, but sometimes we need that leadership to say, go and try to do the impossible for the team to find a way, develop that resourcefulness, and then next time around say, ha, yeah, impossible, let's go see. So that'd be my suggestions.
To finish the session on the very practical note, I'd like to use the question that just came to the chat from Tina. So she asks, so how do young and newly graduated project manager who has no technical experience on the ground can brand himself as a resourceful?
Sounds great. Makes a lot of sense to me. I would just add to that, ask if you can help. I think you need to have mentors, of course, and I used to be one of my favorite expressions. Is there some way I can help? Would you like me to take care of that? Oh my God, managers love to hear that. Would you like me to take care of that? Oh, please, yes. So then you'll get a reputation for being open to taking on and solving problems for other people. The one thing I'd add to that, though, is that doesn't mean you have to go do it all by yourself and never ask for help. In fact, the opposite. Go and do everything you can to solve it and get creative, and things might happen. But the moment you realize you need some help, you need some advice, you need some resources, that is not a sign of weakness. To not go ask for help or for resources would be a sign of weakness. So managers love to see people who will go and see if they can take care of it. And then when they realize they need help or resources, will come back and have that conversation right away. And over time, you'll get the reputation of being a problem solver. The one other thing I'd add quickly is try to get the position as a DPM, Deputy Project Manager. There's not a lot of responsibility, but there's a lot of work. And you get a lot of experience. You tell a PM, throw everything at me. I want to learn everything. I'd like to do everything for you. Take all the work off your desk. And then next time you're asked if you have any PM experience, say, yeah, I was a DPM. Yeah, I was a Deputy Project Manager. So there's a glide path to where you could be project coordinator first, then DPM, and then project manager. That might help.
What I would maybe add to this all is that take into consideration that you are at the beginning of your career and everything needs some time. So even creation of this personal brand in your company, or even when you are creating it on LinkedIn, it will take some time. So invest the energy, but do not have a high expectation that in 1 month everyone will recognize you as a resourcefulness person, because possibly it will take some period, and it really should be like this. It's the evolution in each company.
Awesome. Thank you so much, dear Yeva, Greg, William. Thank you so much for sharing your insights today with us. This hour passed almost like a minute, at least for me, because this was a very intense discussion and a lot of practical issues we managed to bring to the table. So I'm sure that many people from our audience will take a lot with them. Thank you for watching your Sunday for our event. We appreciate it a lot. That's really important for growing a new professional community and new professional generation. Thank you so much for being with us.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thanks, Eva. Thanks,
All
Greg.
right.
Thank you.
Pleasure meeting everyone.